Hi, greetings to you all. I want to speak a bit about the growing sense of quickening and speeding up of events and energetic dynamics, which we will continue to encounter in the entire month of May. And of course, it's a very profound and intense year, as every single astrologer will attest to, which deals so much with profound endings, but also huge new beginnings. One entails the other. We can't separate one from the other. Still, every single month of this will have a very different energy. And now, coming out of the retrograde phases of Venus and Mars, and with Neptune already in Aries, we will continue to get a growing sense of intensification, but also a lot of novelty, a lot of new things, new beginnings emerging. And there's a few things where we can see this especially strongly so for the month of May. First is that Venus is in Aries while Mars is in Leo, and they're both out of their retrogrades. Secondly, it's that Jupiter in Gemini is about to make a square aspect to the nodal axis. The nodal axis is the eclipse points, the south and north node of the moon, and they're always exactly opposite. And Jupiter in Gemini now will come into a perfect square, 90-degree angle, to both the south node in Virgo and the north node in Pisces. Jupiter, of course, rules Pisces traditionally, but it's in the sign of Mercury, Gemini, and making a square to the sign of Virgo, which is also ruled by Gemini. So those are two very interesting things. And then the third one where we can really see this growing sense of quickening is that Saturn is about to leave Pisces for the very first time. And whenever Saturn leaves a sign every 2.5 years, it's a huge ending of a chapter, and there's an integration and reckoning, there's maybe a deeper embodiment, but also crisis moments in regards to that archetype and where and how we build our foundations and the structures that give us a sense of stability, Saturn, in regards to that energetics, but also where and how we encounter scarcity, lack, fear, control, lack of our own agency, coming up to greater forces, and these questions of free will and destiny, fate, that Saturn also implies, since he's the Lord of Karma. So taking all three, though, together, we've got Venus in Aries, which already is a very quick sign. While we are in Taurus season, Taurus is of course ruled by Venus. So even though Taurus likes and needs it stable and slow and embodied and grounded and sensual and the right food and the right touch and the right smell and the right music and everything that helps us get into the deeper embodied presence of our full-fleshed animal human body is what nourishes Taurus, is what Taurus is about in one way or another. It's a deep desire in nature also, which Venus rules. But Venus now in Aries is fast, is upfront, is direct, is raw. It's wearing our emotions and feelings on the sleeves, being very open and direct about them is the medicine right now. But since Venus is in Aries, there's a lot of quickness, a lot of forward momentum, novelty, and just the raw punch of new energetics that really wants to come through here. Add to that Venus will, just 2 days after this really potent full moon in Scorpio full moons always tend to be potent, 2 days later, Venus will reach 9 degrees of Aries, where we had that last Aries solar eclipse end of March. And then another day later, on the 15th of May, Venus will cross 10 degrees of Aries, where she stationed to go retrograde. Which means that from the 14th, 15th, we will definitely see a lot of novelty and new expressions of where and how we relate to the world, how we find love and meaning and meaning in connection, but also meaning and connection in regards to our own self-worth and sensuality and embodiedness and values and possessions and money. So a lot of very big, bold new things will happen there, for every single one of us personally, but also, of course, collectively. Venus is in Aries. Aries is also the sign of war and fighting, and whether it's the tariffs, how do you say that? On the global scale, where we see this trade war of like fighting Aries with goods and values, Venus. We'll also see a continued expression of that, the flow of money and how it's used to control, right? Power and disempower. But Venus in Aries for the entire month will continue to build a trine to Mars. Mars in Leo crossed its retrograde degrees now. There is already all of this novelty coming, which the deep Mars retrograde cycle of 6 months was this deep inner, more subconscious, unconscious process. And now there's new movement, now there's new action, now there's greater alignment with our will, Mars, how we act on Mars, our desires, Venus, how we fight, what we fight for, what we're passionate about, and how all of that connects to our heart, our authentic true self, which both Aries and Leo talk about because they're both fire signs, and they're all about the unapologetic expression of self-identity and the individuation journey of becoming a true and full and a fully embodied self. Which, side note, just Pluto just having gone retrograde and this huge energetic shift the last couple of days, I felt really funky. It's like, it's like a bit vertigo, and at the same time really exhausted. And I heard it from it's like so many people, right? The vertigo, the shift of the deeper tectonic plates of what is moving for us collectively right now. And Aquarius is the nervous system, right? And so anyhow, Pluto's retrograde in Aquarius also talks about all of this, right? Where and how we have adapted to trauma or dissociative patterns within ourselves in order to fit in or belong, for fear of standing alone or being exiled or being quirky and quirky or the weirdo or the space alien who does not belong. Or in order to belong, we try to dissociate from our authentic self. Mars and Leo now shows us, Pluto retrograde in Aquarius shows us, we can't go on like that. Venus in Aries is translating all of that into very concrete bodily action. So Venus and Mars will continue to build this flowing, harmonious aspect pattern called a trine from both of the fire signs, showing where there will be greater and greater alignment of our actions in regards to our desires, and both in a fiery, driven, zesty, juicy, joyful, expressive, and hopefully authentic way. Super important. Tendency here could be to be too aggressive or too demanding, or because it's a trine pattern, the opposite of it, of not wanting to have the confrontation, of trying to appease too much and just go with the flow. And sort of really standing up for what we want to fight for. And there's a lot of things worth fighting for, especially right now. And Saturn and Aries will deepen all of that tremendously over the next 2.5 years, because our identity is built so much also on the things that we stand for, right? And what we really fight for, and the powers that we do oppose. This is identity forming and creating. And for better or worse, we will see a lot of expressions of that with Saturn in Aries. The other thing was Jupiter squaring the nodal axis. Jupiter rules where and how we find belief and meaning and trust, the greater picture, the greater arrow that we want to aim for, with the Sagittarius side. But Jupiter's in Gemini. There's all of this expansion, Jupiter, of data, input, information, conversations, things to listen to or hear, where and how our nervous system gets so overloaded that the Virgo side, the South Node in Virgo, can't discern information anymore. And this high strongness and tension in our nervous system from the mind can even affect the physical body. Virgo is a sign where and how we somatize from the level of mind and nervous system to the physical soma body, right? Virgo is an earth sign. Whereas the North Node in Pisces, this domain traditionally ruled by Jupiter, talks about faith, surrender, letting go, not being in control, not needing to know all the answers, just really trusting on a deeper level. But Venus and Aries is still acting, It's not about bypassing, it's not about dissociating or escaping either. But this is a building tension between our rational logical mind that will feel continuously and more so overwhelmed or confused, overpowered with not knowing how to discern things anymore, not knowing how to discern truth anymore, not knowing how to discern what is meaningful to us or our own personal journey, or not knowing how to handle all the input and information and perspectives that we get on a daily into our greater meaning system. And that is, of course, lastly, where Saturn moving into Aries, we'll talk much more about the move into Aries and this newness and freshness that this brings. But first, Saturn will, over the next coming days, together with this Scorpio full moon, go to 29 degrees of Pisces. Like I said, every time Saturn is on the last degree of a sign, there's this integration of the Saturnian archetype of structure and discipline and things that give us structure and stability in regards to that archetype, but where and how we also meet outer authority, outer powers that try to maybe control us or impose their will onto us. So every time Saturn comes to 29 degrees of any given sign, it's a chapter ending for every single one of us and collectively. But now Saturn comes to 29 degrees of Pisces, the very last sign of the zodiac, which means that the integration or crisis moment, the completion and endings of chapters of our lives will be so much bigger. Since it's in Pisces, it has a tinge of the unconscious, of the intangible, of not fully graspable, or what our, again, Virgo or Gemini, what our rational human little monkey brain mind can grasp. And that just deepens this crisis point of the 29th degree, called the anaretic degree. It's a crisis energy of where and how can we integrate our faith, our trust, our belief, what we even believe in, what kind of spirituality, spiritual connection, religious ideas, philosophical ideas we can still hold and maintain that give us an inner sense of stability, and where and how we feel like we're losing it, we're slacking, we're dissolving on that level. Nothing makes sense anymore. So with Saturn reaching this 29th degree, there can be this mounting pressure, which both Venus and Mars and fire signs, and then they make their perfect trine on the day the Sun enters Gemini, which will bring even more quickness. It just adds a lot to this building pressure that also comes there, right? It's about the ending. Yeah, it's about a lot of new beginnings, but it's also about the ending. This mounting pressure here of Saturn on the last degree over the next 2-3 weeks. Saturn leaves Pisces for the first time on May 25th. It will come back in September. We'll have a couple of more months of Saturn and Pisces to really wrap these lessons up, but this is the first big bang. And so it just all adds to this growing intensity and this growing evolutionary necessity, what I said earlier, this growing evolutionary edge that we all feel like we're approaching, where so many new things want to unfold, want to happen, want to come into our life, we want to make happen, we realize on some conscious or subconscious level are done with those identities, those structures, Saturn, they don't serve us any longer, we need to let them go. But where that can also lead to all of these deeper and deeper crises of meaning, also collectively. Yeah, in the mix there's the Scorpio Full Moon, but I'll talk about that in another video, which is on Monday. And yeah, I find the full moons, especially the ones in Scorpio, they are great teachers of astrology, because at some point when you really get into it, and I'm assuming if you listen to something like this, you are learning to remember time by the lunation cycle, what you felt or experienced or happened in your life at a given full or new moon, at some point almost overlays or maybe even fully replaces the memory capacity of the linear mind of like, oh yeah, that was May 17th, right? So we have that with some very intense or concrete dates maybe in our lives, the loss of a loved one, the birth of a new thing, of a new project, of a new baby. We remember those dates, we tend to. But even if there are other things which are profound or intense in the moment, we tend to forget or get hazy about like, when did this happen? But especially the Scorpio full moons, I find they're really good to think back on what happened last year, that Scorpio full moon this year, because it tends to be like very, very, very precise kind of Scorpio energy, right? Transformation and breakthroughs and alchemizing and meeting the shadow and intimacy questions. So all of them are also in the field, and much deeper metaphysical, esoterically, spiritually interesting philosophical concepts are also in the field, especially for this Vesak full moon, the full moon of the birth, enlightenment, and leaving of the physical body of the person we call the Buddha, which is spiritually a very important festival in the year. So that also happens on Monday, so you will feel this building over the weekend. But I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for listening. That was a lot. I hope you were able to follow. Speak your feelings, be open and raw and direct, but also don't try to fight your way through everything, but also don't try to bypass your feelings, right? I guess these are some of the gifts of this moment in time. Bring it all back down to the body, bring it back to Taurus, find that embodied sense of safety and stability within, and being authentic and real about it at the same time, maybe in ways that you were never able to, or at least not in the past. And then watch how and where things unfold into very strong blossoming newness and very strong big new chapters, and how that ties back to this Venus retrograde journey that began on March 2nd, I think, on 10 degrees of Aries, right? So what will happen now on May 14th, 15 will strongly tie back to beginning of March and also end of March, that Aries solar eclipse. And yeah, then I'll see you next time. And thank you so much for watching, listening. Leave in your comments whatever you felt about this. I'd be so glad and happy to read it. And if you want to meet up for a deep dive into your own blueprint of your soul, the birth chart of this incarnation of yours, always happy to meet you there as well. And yeah, see you next time. Bye bye.